Yep, we're going live with Shea Justice at Studio Vexer, and we're looking at your new work. What do you want to talk?
Not new work, ongoing, continuous, I should say.
Ongoing continuous work.
Because some of these I started years and years ago when I was in graduate school, and it's all part of a 20, 30-year plan I've been having an exhibition since 2012. Especially now, I'm looking at an opportunity because of the whole controversy over critical race theory. People saying, oh my God, you're going to hurt people's feelings if the children learn information and stuff like that. For me, I'm like, oh, I embrace it. If you're so worried about your children being, oh, your granddaddy lynched my granddaddy and all that stuff, then you're not going to want to look at my work, because I'm going to call it out. So I have a couple of Confederate flags that you always hear people say, oh, it's heritage, it isn't hate, it's good, it's there's all this good stuff about it. So I said, well, let's really look at what it meant to black men, women, and children. So I started doing iron-on transfers into an actual flag.
Nice.
This is a drawing I did from a chain gang. This is a drawing I did of a Sojourner Truth. I went to the Mass 54th at the State House and I took this photo and then found a way to actually transfer it into the red of it, because red is so symbolic of blood in so many ways. So I also bought several Civil War Union soldiers in battle, because when people say it had nothing to do with this is what it's about. The war, this is what it was about. The enslavement, why the South decided to get out of the Union against the Constitution. So what I've also done in a lot of my sketchbooks, and you'll see it in a lot of my work, the stuff, the backlash against critical race theory, and I always ask the question, well, what exactly is it, that information that's so upsetting you don't want to know? Because whatever that is, I want to explore. The fact that menstrual cycles, but also when black women gave birth, slaves often had to breastfeed white women's children for different reasons that they were forced to. And there's prime examples of it that have happened in terms of people taking photos of it in situations like that. So I was like, let me get some of this stuff written down. Continuing with it here. What's happening with our democracy in terms of the court systems? I'm very obsessive about a lot of court system stuff that's happening, particularly after the Ahmaud Arbery case. Even though those guys got convicted, let's look at the Rittenhouse case. It's like a slippery slope as to what you can and can't do with guns and weapons. And a lot of what people do is they reference old laws from the times of slavery. And that just pisses me off. This was every single president of the United States I've been working in sketchbooks about for the last 7 or 8 years. And this is mine's on Calvin Coolidge, who I call a punk bitch. So this was about the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927, when the flood was so bad they were forcing black people, and this was the Red Cross when it was led by future President Herbert Hoover. They were forcing black people by gunpoint into sandbagging the whole area to stop the flood waters back. And if you were sick or you died, they'd force you to use that person's dead body to help sandbag.
Oh my God.
And so they incessantly did that. And it reminded me of the Hurricane Katrina situation in terms of the government knew this was going to happen. They have Bush on tape even saying, oh, I know, we're going to be ready for this. And then just let that happen and kill so many people. So that, when Donald Trump had said that the impeachment inquiry reminded him of a lynching, I said, you don't even know what the hell a lynching is. So I compared it to Mary Turner, who they killed her husband, and she was 8 months pregnant. And when she went to complain about it, the townspeople found her, lynched her, and then cut the baby out of her and stomped it to death. That's a lynching. So I have it with the retelling of the lynching by Claude McKay. Her spirit of smoke ascended in heaven. Her father, by the cruelest way of pain, has bidden her to his bosom once again. The awful sin remains still unforgiven. So for me, I'm like, I want to talk stories. Too many of us have died to just be like, let's not talk about it, it's upsetting. So what I try to do with what I'm doing up to this point is trying to be visually compelling to say, I want to bring you in and read this. I want to bring you in and see this and learn this. Let's see, some of these I've just started on. Here's another one. Mass 54th charge. Obviously, the most famous situation that they used when they made the film Glory, and we had at the State House and stuff like that. So sometimes I'll try to recreate certain battle scenes. I find it frustrating, and I said it before, about how if you're a visitor into Boston and you go to Faneuil Hall and you're a tourist and you're black, what kinds of things can you buy and bring home that represents us? They have a cart at the in Faneuil Hall if you ever go in there. Areas where there's food and all this other stuff, it's almost like a food court. They have a cart for Irish people. Kiss Me, I'm Irish, t-shirts, all these other things, all these visual representations in there. But there's nothing for us. And that's not to say that they don't deserve that or whatever, but it's like, black people are big. You can't even find a poster of Christmas addicts or anything to buy. So I've always tried to reach out to different factors or different people there to say, I'd like to be able to illustrate some stuff that tourists can see, because it's very significant. Denzel Washington won an Oscar for Glory. And we have a statue dedicated to it. But if you want a poster or something, once you've seen it, it's not there. So, my Aunt Esther cussing out Ronald Reagan. I wanted to put something in there for that, just because it was interesting. This is what I did during the time of the thing that happened on January 6th. And I remember when Sarah Palin said lipstick on a pig, and I was like, yeah, we got a pig. He's president of the United States, and look what he's done. And then, let's see if I can find out. So this is one of my sketchbooks of just taking notes and ideas. And sometimes, you gotta take a break, it's depressing, so I may draw the voodoo doll from Trilogy of Terror, because that's interesting. And I love that movie, so I'm like, let me just put that in there. Over here, because we're moving around, obviously. I did these some years back. When you look at this in the crucifixion, I chose this doll of Geordie LaForge because, number one, he's futuristic in terms of Star Trek, but he was also Kunta Kinte. And it's like, what has changed in the passage of time when it comes to black men in this world and in this country? So when I created the crucifix, I put Mumia Abu Jamal in there. Because I believe, they've been trying to crucify that brother for years. So, interracial rock'em sock'em robots. If you look inside here, there's a Dennis the Menace comic strip I remember seeing when I was a little boy, where Dennis the Menace was complaining because his black friend ran faster than him.
Oh, wow.
I was like, Hank Ketchum did the most awful illustration of a black kid. And I remember that. It's right in there, right there. So we focused on lynching and just how problematic and how popular it is, or it has been. And then obviously the issue of guns, the rights to vote, things like that I started finding these sentimental objects to. Now, if you all remember Betty Saar's The Liberation of Aunt Jemima, where Aunt Jemima's like this and smiling, I did a sequel to it, which I call Uncle Ben's Ready to Bust a Cap.
Say it again.
Uncle Ben is ready to bust a cap. So I gotta find a way to somehow include this to it. But so if you look, I wanted to have it because hers is straight up like this. I wanted to have it where he's got a view and he's about to do something. So that's why I like it elevated like this. I had binoculars there. If you look inside, Rostas, the black cream of wheat guy, his hands are like this because somebody's accusing him of looking at this hot white woman in here. So when you look at this, but all of these sentimental things, I have Tintin being carried on his back with all these slaves, and some of the racist things, but also some of the biblical quotes that were used to justify slavery that they often used. I have a small Confederate flag in here, and just symbolic objects that for me speak to oppression, racism, all these different things. So that's what you'll see up close. So I did this some years back. And there's, of course, Uncle Ben saying, I wasn't looking at the white woman. And then this here is Roger Taney, When I had the show at Spoke Gallery, people said they really liked the constitutional series that I was doing, so I wanted to go back to address. I've already done one of Tanny on the Larger Scroll, but the one of J. Marion Sims, the father of gynecology, who experimented on slaves and was tearing them apart and not giving them any sedatives or anything. So I wanted to address Roger Tanny and all the devastation that's happened since 1857 when he did the Dred Scott decision of that black people have no rights, a white man's bound to respect. Because in some way, shape, or form for the last several hundred years, people keep trying to go back to it. Whether it's you raped a white woman, voter suppression issues, stand your ground laws, disinformation, all these things. Or especially because of the 3/5 compromise that's in the Constitution, because that was to say, well, slaves count as 3/5 of a person, so the numbers are balanced so that the South doesn't have too many people and all this other stuff. And I'm like, that was a census thing from like the 1800s. In 2020, we get undercounted? What the fuck does that mean? So it's like, it's almost a retrograde thing that's happening with them attempting to bring slavery back in all these different forms. I mean, they're already doing it with the prison industrial complex the last several hundred years. But when it comes to the census, because that's where the money goes to neighborhoods and communities, and it's like, what do you mean you undercounted us? It goes right back to that. So of course Trayvon Martin, George Stinney, who got the electric chair for killing 2 white girls, which they exonerated him for like 70 years later. He was so little when they strapped him up to the electric chair, they had to put books underneath him so that he could sit in it. And just all of it's going to be colorized at a certain point, but what will it take for me to be seen as American? I'm going to just leave as it is. I'm not going to colorize that, because that's the question I still have up to this point.
What do you mean colorize it?
Paint, colorize it a little bit more with paint, or with this kind of yellowish thing, so it blends more with the text of the background. And there's going to probably be a few more figures. I wanted to leave some of the stuff intact in terms of the text, the original text. So in some of these spaces, I'm going to continue it. My main thing was trying to make sure I got the eyes more accurate, because his eyes are kind of weird if you look at the photo of him and stuff, to just make sure the eyes are more accurate. But as I was saying before, inspiration from Dana Chandler, since I was a kid, and the political stuff and the stuff I learned in college, that I want to build something that when there's an exhibit on critical race theory, all this stuff is addressed head on. I don't care about consequences, people saying, well, that's not true, that's not what I think. I don't care about that stuff. So that's what this is, and that's why I said, I'll bring it in and have people give me some feedback.
So one of the criticisms that I hear a lot about, and I think it's really funny that people criticize critical race theory when it's a lens, it's a movement, it's a way to look at things, and you're critiquing something as someone's lens, which is ironic to me. But people criticize it as not being a scholarly pursuit because it's largely based on people's stories. And here you're showing us documents from, and pieces from history, pieces from first-person accounts. Like, how do you respond to that? Like, you're synthesizing critical race theory through your art, which is another way of storytelling, right? And you use the term, you wanted to tell stories. How do you feel about that? Like that tension?
Well, first of all, critical race theory is only taught in colleges, but you wouldn't know that by the hysteria that the Republican Party has been doing by demanding that high schools and middle schools are not teaching it. Maine, New Hampshire, Texas, all these different states. It's an undercover bullshit operation. And when I say that, I say this, because in Tennessee, they've decided to try to pass a law to say, I don't want to talk about Ruby Bridges. I don't want to talk about Martin Luther King, because you hurt people's feelings. So now they're going for these main symbols and icons. That's what the original intention was. To say, critical race theory, it's scary, it's scary. I'm thinking we're living practically in the time of the 1950s when it comes to the Red Scare. Of just, oh my God, you smell like a communist, you look like a communist, you breathe like a communist, and then all of a sudden people lose their lives, their livelihood, their jobs. They've had 2 principals already in this country get fired because of critical race theory. And And it's like, well, okay, what can you talk about? They try to come up with all these different narratives to say, well, if you talk about Martin Luther King, don't talk about the violence, don't talk about the this, talk about holding hands with white kids and everyone got along, and that's the end of the story. That's why that speech has been like time capsule forever. Nobody want to talk about the last speech before he got killed. Everybody get quiet over that.
So that's storytelling. They do want stories.
They want to control the narrative, so it's white people are great, everyone was innocent, everyone got along.
That narrative of.
I tell you now, if I was a member of a Native American tribe, I'd be like, mother F all y'all.
Right.
When it comes to stories, I got some stories.
And that's another aspect of critical race theory, right? That it's about intersectionality.
Yeah.
Like there's an intersection of injustice that happens to lots of different groups.
Chinese, Mexicans, the Zoot Suit riots from back years ago, the Chinese railroad situations, the Chinese exclusionary acts that existed to prevent immigration in this country, the violence that came with trying to form unions. And get rights. This is beyond just A. Philip Randolph and the black people with the sleeping car porter unions. But even before that, there's always this violence against, I want to unionize because I don't want to work a 40-hour week, lose 2 fingers in a factory, and my child gets killed.
Right.
Yeah.
And and you bring that up, you bring that into the conversation that like it's about rights and it's about laws and policies, right? Because that's another kind of tenet and a purpose of critical race theory as a body as a field of study, right? From way far back as the 70s and even before.
The backlash started soon as Project 1619 came out. That's when this really started accelerating. Because if you look at the New York Times thing, I have a copy of Project 1619. People loved it and were like, we need to put this in schools and put it as a part of the curriculum. And what ended up happening? Republican backlash. Critical race theory got started because a lot of black ministers in these giant evangelical churches wanted to start incorporating it to say it's wrong to use the Bible to justify segregation and slavery, and this is what had happened years ago. And a lot of those conservative white evangelicals got mad, and it was like a leadership committee of them. They got mad and were like, oh, hell no, y'all not teaching that, of how the Bible was used to justify slavery and white Jesus and so forth and so on. So what did they do? They got in touch with Pat Robertson and their contacts on Fox News, and suddenly it got elevated into this mainstream thing. But that started with evangelicals who were like, oh no, y'all not even going to address how slavery was used, how the Bible was used to justify slavery. That's going to be a whole can of worms that's going to be upsetting. And part of the reason I think people don't want to address it is because if you address it, conversation might come down to reparations. Don't nobody want to pay us back for billions and billions and billions, untold billions of dollars. And you don't want to have to own what your ancestors did, because if you own what your ancestors did, a lot of them I think will be crying. The rape, the Mary Turner killing, there's so many that it's like, if you got to own it, you're going to be crying, you're going to be upset. So let's talk about something better, is usually the attitude. Let's talk about something positive. It's the American way. Lies and denial, it just is. For me, I'm like, I embrace it. If you're offended about black women being forced to breastfeed white women's babies back in the day in the antebellum South, or the fact that they used to grab in Florida black slave babies and have them dangling to get alligators to come out and try to eat them. I've seen the postcards, the pictures, the this. I'm going to talk about it. I don't care what you get mad. Tons of that stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to talk about it. I don't care who gets offended.
I have a question.
Yes, sure.
One of the things that I really like about this is that it sparks emotion.
Really?
Whether it be negative emotion, like such as, first of all, the negative emotion is one of the things I like about it.
This is a quote, hold on one second. This is a quote from the Vice President of the Confederacy, specifically saying, we got the hell out of the Union, the United States, and formed our own government because of the Constitution saying all men are created equal. We getting out. Exact quotes. I love saving that stuff. Go ahead, I'm sorry. You got a question?
Are you specifically just putting everything out there and draw your own conclusion? Or are you specifically with your artwork saying, look, this is pissing me off. This is pissing off most black people. Why aren't you pissed?
It's a mix. I don't spend a lot of time being upset. I spend a lot of time reading and writing. And at a certain point, I've been detached enough that for me, just writing it down and illustrating it and finding a way to make it visually compelling for me, or if someone sees all of this, that's more important to me. If I start getting too emotionally caught up, you're going to start writing too much anger, and you may not be able creatively to do the process you want to do of what you want to say. So for me, I'm like, okay, if she wants to see this, what kind of things could I visually do that makes it compelling or interesting? But like I said, the backlash against it, I'm like, really? You all mad over something like this? Let me look this up and let me start doing the research. And then when I do due diligence, I'm like, no wonder they want to do a cover up. Look at this, this, and this, and this. So a lot of times I'm cutting and pasting, gluing, and sketching and stuff. But for me, ultimately, which is what I said to Cedric, I'd love to be a part of some sort of exhibit that just speaks on truth. Dana Chandler did that stuff all the time in the 70s with his paintings and stuff. So I'm like, I'd love to do an exhibit just on truth. Call it critical race theory or critical. I think the name freaks people out too, because theory seems like it's untested and you don't know. Where it should be like called critical race facts or something, or critical race experience or something different. But that's how I look at it, is I just work my way through it, 20-something years. Do I have an answer for any of it? Oh my God, no. No, not at all. I wouldn't even lie to you and be like, here's how we should behave. If W.E.B. Du Bois couldn't solve it, or Malcolm X and Martin Luther King couldn't solve it, my ass can't solve it. So I'm not going to lie and be like, yeah, here's what we should do. It's not going to happen.
I'm wondering if anybody on the live has responses or questions if you're still here. We're here with Shea Justice in the studio.
You love throwing that middle name out, don't you?
Yeah, man. Yo, that's a baller ass middle name, Shea Justice.
The usage of black babies as bait for alligators.
So this is definitely like almost journalistic work, right? I love the incorporation of the handwriting in the work and the reportage, as they say. What do you think is the synergy or the kind of connection between the work in your sketchbook and the work, the montage and three-dimensional work that you're starting to do, or you have been doing? What's the connection for you?
COVID. I coughed. I'm going to let you all know I don't have COVID because I don't want to make anyone nervous if I cough. The synergy between the two?
Yeah, because I see some.
It really depends. When it comes to the combination, it really depends on what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to do. When I got in that car accident in February, I had months of just in recovery doing watercolor sketchbook drawings because people kept sending me a lot of watercolor paints. And then as I was recuperating and I got back to these, it's more about fact. For number one, getting my facts straight, because I don't want to just come up with rhetoric that people don't think is real or think he's full of shit. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So it's always just facts. Stick to the facts, stick to the truth, and whoever gets offended, I don't care. So in terms of sketchbooks, this is one kind of sketchbook, but I have several at home, some of which are just paintings and drawings of still lifes and stuff in my neighborhood and things like that that I've done. I brought this in because it kind of relates to all of this as an overall theme, critical race theory. So these were some examples and some things that I was like, okay, this is all intertwined. But I could have brought in my other sketchbooks on other presidents and all that. But I didn't want to bring in too much, obviously.
There's an immediacy to your work, Shea. If you don't mind me saying, there's an immediacy, like there's a feeling of the moment. By looking at your sketchbooks, like you have incredible skill as a drafts person, and the way you draw. Not many people could capture that thought in that moment as quickly as you do. And we know about the Scroll Project, and we see in your sketches how much of a dress person you are. And then in these works, these three-dimensional works, I also feel like there's an immediacy, right? As we look at Uncle Ben's about to bust a cap.
Yep.
Right? And I love that. I love it. I love that you're laughing at the title, right? Because it's like you're using humor and you're using.
I love Betty Sars.
Yeah.
And I respect liberation of Aunt Jemima.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's a very profound, deep thing. But for mine, maybe it's because I'm part of the hip hop generation from the 80s or something, but I was like, yeah, Uncle Ben about to bust a cap.
Well, yeah, it's contemporary, right?
Or something.
It's contemporary. So, but that immediacy in this work, it feels like you've taken your sketchbook and made them three-dimensional. You've taken the elements, these objects, and you've incorporated them in the same physical language. I don't know if other people agree or dig what I'm saying.
I agree. What were you I thought you were going to say something. Some of it can be emotionally taxing. Mm-hmm. That's why, like I said, I don't have my other sketchbooks with the landscapes and the leaves and stuff, because when I was on crutches, I was going through Jamaica Pond all the time, drawing the ducks and the animals and stuff like that. That might be another crit night.
Yeah.
I say this is stuff that's not even political.
Okay.
But for me, the gist of it is there's so much information, but there's so much lies and distortions from people who are ignorant and uninformed that it makes you kind of recoil a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I'm like, let me just do some due diligence. I mean, how often in America you're going to have some black man say, you know what, Calvin Coolidge was a bitch? Mm-hmm. And yet, I've done enough research. He was a big proponent of eugenics and immigration laws to make sure that America was staying mostly European because of biological reasons and stuff. And this is just, I constantly read all the time when I'm at home. And so when I start reading, my mind starts thinking about stuff. Like the last major book I read and I reread was Medical Apartheid, about the history of experimentations on black people since the days of slavery. Usually when and I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, no.
Usually when I read, after I'm done reading, I try to process the information, try to figure out what I'm going to do with it next.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you see the stuff that you see. It's like saying, oh my God, I read this thing, I read this about this person or this event that happened. Mm-hmm. How can I show it or express it or make it interesting enough for someone who doesn't particularly like history or doesn't particularly care about history? What can you do to make it compelling and interesting? So that's a lot of what I do as a teacher right now.
I wonder how people feel about the work, or how do you respond? Well, first of all, because this is your crit, what questions do you have about the work as objects? I know you, as you came in and you were setting up, we started a quick discussion about the work as objects, and you had some questions that you wanted us to help you grapple with.
My question is, obviously these figures are plastic, how to get through or make it glued so it doesn't, after a while the glue doesn't dry and just pop off. You gave a great suggestion about me maybe sewing over them, maybe with the glue and stuff like, or sewing through their legs so it'll hold them in place. I think that's a great idea. I'm probably going to consider doing that. Yeah, finding the right glues for the surface has been a challenge because it's plastic, because this is cloth. That's
because you want to have it hanging up.
It's supposed to. The hooks are right here. It's supposed to be hanging up directly like that, so you look right into it, so you can see all this.
Oh, so you'd be looking down from a topographical point of view on that.
No, you'd be boom, straight up like this.
Right.
This is the figure. Yeah.
So we would see it straight at it, but we'd see the tops of the figures' heads. Yeah. We'd see it as if we were
see the battle formation.
Right, as if we were floating in the air, looking at like the battle formation.
Yep, and you see the battle formation.
Okay, so kind of going to that pictorial format.
Yeah.
So the questions are about the surface. Other people, I know we have a couple. We have some sculptors in the house. What are some questions about? Like, what are some ideas about the objects and joinery? I have some questions about the surface because and how it starts to mimic or kind of hint at a landscape. But what are some other responses about this as object?
The glue is distracting. The glue wasn't showing up in the Uncle Ben one.
Okay.
There's a lot of glue that shows up that is out of place and distracts from the objects.
That happened years ago too.
Yeah.
Because this is like 8 years old. Yeah, I totally see that. That damn gorilla glue.
Yeah.
Or something, it just bubbles up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can.
Maybe use a two-part epoxy.
That's what I suggested.
A
Epoxy.
two-part epoxy. It's just a type of glue. It comes in like two separated containers, and you open it and you have to mix them up together, and then they harden.
Hardware store.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't bubble up.
Because I'm not crazy about
And
it.
it's clear.
It's annoying. But
And
at the
it's
very
strong.
least, I'm happy that it held them down all these years. But
Yeah.
yeah, I like to get the really like too. I totally understand
Yeah.
that. Remind me of that later, so I can go pick it up tomorrow. So
Yeah.
I'll pick it up tomorrow.
I'm torn with the Constitution piece,
Mm-hmm.
where you mentioned that you wanted to paint in some of the quotes to kind of have them blend into the background. But I think from what you're trying to say, they stand out. Whereas, considering most people don't know the Constitution anyway,
Oh yeah.
you know, I'm like, but those particular words stand out, you know, for what you're trying to
It
say.
won't, by my covering them, it won't cover it. By my coloring over them with the like raw ochre or yellow ochre or something, watercolor.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as I did with the other constitutions
Oh.
that I had on display. It'll show white racial anxiety and all these other different issues I'm going to put in there. But at the end of the day, my point is, what will it take for me to be seen as an American?
Oh, okay, I see.
That's really the point of all
So
this.
there's the artistry right there.
So that's why I want that to be highlighted and everything else just blended in.
Mm.
Because it's all shenanigans. Rape of white women, we all go to jail, get killed, this. Racial, what D.L. Hughley said, the most dangerous place for a black person in America is in a white person's imagination. Yeah. So it's like all these issues.
Aesthetically, I think it'll look better if they were faded a bit. If you
Faded?
if you use the ochre.
Yeah, that's it. You came to the show at the thing. Did you notice that with the other ones? The Frederick Douglass and the other ones I did? You probably, if you don't remember. I did the same thing with those. Yeah, I did the same thing.
I've got a question, Shea, about, so I was thinking about what he was saying about them looking like 3D representations of what's going on in your sketchbook.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one element in your sketchbook that I don't see in the other pieces, which is like the emotionally charged like handwriting where you're thinking where you're putting your own thoughts out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I see like the pulling from sources, I see that happening in the work. But that piece that happens in the sketchbook
In
where
terms of my writing here.
yeah, and you've got like this thing here where it says, my soul cries over this, right?
Yep.
Like that piece where you're, all that personal charge that's different than just the things that you find in source, that's like the,
Yeah,
That's the
in terms of
unique
my own feelings and my
yeah,
thoughts.
I'm wondering if that type of writing ever shows up in any of the, like,
On the scroll project, all
other
over the
pieces.
place.
Oh, yeah?
On the, do you know what I'm talking about? The
I don't
scroll?
think I know the scroll project.
In 2003, I started illustrating the war on terror on this Chinese rice paper scroll. So I've been working on it for the last 20 years. I'm going to continue working on it because I still have paper left. And I illustrated from Bush's presidency through Obama's through all the way up to Joe Biden's. Thoughts, views, opinions on how putting money into the military-industrial complex has impacted us socially. For instance, the surplus of military hardware that got approved post 9/11 was given to the police departments in the United States, which is why cops are always showing up deep with armor and stuff when there's a protest. I saw that coming years ago. And so on that, I've done a lot of editorial writing in addition to fact finding and stuff like that. If you ever want to take a look, it's on YouTube and all that stuff, because I've had documentaries done about me, small little documentaries friends have done to help me highlight it. So in that case, I've been able to say, this is how I feel. This is what's hurting myself.
Did you think that the writing route would be well incorporated into the tanning piece, tanner piece, or the
Writing?
yeah, or where did you think that it needed some of that emotionally charged writing?
I don't know. I was just curious if it was something he incorporated ever, because
I
see that. I was just thinking about
writing, except what would it take for me to be seen as an American?
Yeah, that
all
was
this
about
is just fact shit. Stand your ground law, disinformation, fueling Republicans' effort to limit our voting rights, the 2020 census. Those are facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just asked the question: what will it take for me to be seen as an American?
But that's printed, right? That's something that that physical collage piece.
Yep.
Was that something that you found somewhere, or that you typed out, printed out, and then cut out?
I don't remember. I have tons and tons. I just when I lay them out and then I start thinking about them and where things go and stuff like that.
Because I'm wondering,
it could have been from a magazine or a book. I just know the famous poem, I Too Sing America. So it's always in the back of my mind. How many ways can you keep passing laws to try to prevent me from being an American?
I'm wondering if that's what Ruth is talking about, like having your actual handwriting for that part that you
I'm not saying necessarily in that piece. I'm just saying.
Oh.
In general,
okay.
across all of the pieces, I just think that's it's a really powerful element that I see in the sketchbook that I
don't see in the others.
That I don't see in the others, and I think the thing that element does is it brings not just everything else outside of you, which you're like in some way the other piece is like you're a curator. You're a curator of our history and our present, and you're choosing which pieces of our history and our present to show us so that we can understand our reality, right?
Yeah.
But what that emotionally charged writing in the sketchbook does is it goes beyond the curation and gives us like a peek into your heart and how your heart responds to what you've curated in a different way.
My sketchbooks, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Thus, I can call Calvin Coolidge a punk bitch. Because that's an emotional response to a horrendous thing he did to black people in 1927. So I've been able to do that here. With these, it was mainly, a lot of this was from when I was in graduate school and piecing things together for my presentation. Because they always wanted you, I went to Art Institute of Boston, they wanted us to experiment with materials. And they knew I could draw and do the things I was doing. A couple of my mentors were like, we want you to experiment with other stuff and see what you do. And that's when I started experimenting and everything. So that's pretty much what you're seeing reflections of here.
So,
but yeah, the emotional vibe of it, all on the scroll project and all that other stuff. And I actually consider myself lucky because I've 20 years is a long time to do one thing. And I've been able to consistently do that and not let myself just give up or be distracted when I've seen things and I've learned things in the news and on television that just made me want to give up and just go, ugh, it's emotionally taxing to do this or to write these things down. Because after a while, it's like Mark Twain said, people are better off not knowing how government is run and how sausages are made. The trauma would just mess you up. And that's been hard for me.
I'm a vegetarian.
Say it again.
I'm a vegetarian. I don't know how to read.
right? A vegetarian and anarchist, right? No government, no sausage. Do you think your work is in conversation with anybody in the contemporary canon, Shea? Like, do you feel like or this work specifically? I know that there's lots of people who you feel inspired by.
That it's in that sense. I think the closest, I hate saying the closest to me, but the one who really kind of stood out to me is Carol Walker's work.
Mm-hmm.
Because for all people say about the silhouettes she did during slavery, she's showing rape, sex, pregnancy, birth, all this stuff. I've seen her exhibit when I was in New York some time ago, and I'm like, people were offended and upset by it at first, but it's like, no, it's just truth. She found a way to visually represent truth in a lot of ways. Some of it's distorted because some of those penises are massive or whatever, but it's true. And so on that sense, I thought about her, I get so caught up in my own working on this kind of stuff that I think the last time I felt that way about it was when your nephew was here and he exhibited his stuff. That
Shout
made
out.
me think about it. Huh?
Shout out to Cedric.
Cedric Vice Douglas. What? But that seeing his stuff was like, yeah, we're in sync about things and about the political and stuff like that. I thought the thing he was doing with the visuals over where the statues used to be, I thought that was a really good idea. So it was like, you know, I was vibing with what he was saying. But I don't spend a lot of time on the art world. You know what I mean? Who else is out there and what's going on and how this will fit. I'd rather come take drawing classes, hang out and do what we've been doing. And when we get an opportunity for an exhibit like we did at 13 or at Spoke Gallery or whatever, have fun and do that. But I haven't really messed with a lot of contemporaries or had those kinds of conversations.
As a teacher, do you feel like the work is a lesson in itself, or the work is a vehicle to a lesson?
Both. I think both. I want people to learn from it, but I don't care about whose feelings get hurt and all that. That's why when you remember when I spoke at Spoke Gallery, I was talking about Robert Crumb. And how seeing his documentary when I went to the theater in Coolidge Corner years ago, that guy, I looked at his comics, that guy was so racist, sexist. I mean, how many ways can you split a woman's body and wrap her and shove her head in the toilet and all the racist stuff he did? But the one thing he consistently did was he was honest about his fantasies, his fears, his anxieties, and whatever. And I'm like, that's something I'm giving him props for, because I'm like, he was honest. Why can't I be honest about my work? Or honest about how I'm viewing the world and what's going on. And I think that was a major kind of contributing factor with the Scroll Project. Because that's 20-something years of that. A lot of that's brutal honesty and feelings, thoughts of what I'm observing and what's going on around me. That's a lot of that. So I hope that answers what you're saying.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think it does. It answers a lot, and I remember that comment about it stuck with me for a while when you talked about Crumb and respecting that honesty, and that's something I struggle with a lot. I'm not sure how other people feel about that. That there are sometimes artists or people in the world who you admire for what they do, but then realize, oh, you're a whole ass problem. You know, and how you reconcile their honesty with their humanity and their fallibility. Do you feel as...
I don't go to the library buying any of his books or anything.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I get the gist.
Oh.
I get the gist.
I was at a record store, and we were just going like Golden Nuggets, shout out, or just Nuggets now. And it was, I forget the name of it. It's on my photo reel here somewhere, and it was an illustrated cover by Robert Crumb, and of course I'm like, oh wow, Robert Crumb did an album cover.
Black slave gypsy looking woman on it.
Man, bam, like of course, like clockwork, a racist image pops up in Robert Crumb, like illustration that's out there for the world to see, and I think that so there's people.
He loves jazz and blues, so he has done some very accurate paintings of famous jazz and blues musicians because he loved that kind of music. And they're really, really nicely done. So it's like a weird dichotomy of, you know, he raises his hell, but you like our music.
They don't love us, but they love the idea of us.
Exactly.
Now, do you feel that? I won't pretend to know that much about Crumb. I feel like when people show me who they are, I'm like, all right, cool, I'm good. Like, but as someone who uses really racially charged imagery for a very different purpose, do you feel like that you ever get, and you did kind of mention that you get some of the same energy or some of the same reactions and backlash that someone like Crumb gets?
I don't think he got backlash. I thought he was celebrated. They made a documentary about him. That documentary almost was nominated for an Oscar about him and his family. I don't think everyone was mad at him. Think about the time. That was like 1990 when that documentary was made. Can he get away with it now? I doubt it. But at the time, he's been celebrated. He's considered one of the greatest underground artists of all time. He sold all of his sketchbooks to a guy who bought him a chalet in France. And that's why he's been living in France all this time. Just sold all his sketchbooks to this guy. And managed to get a house in New York. Is in terms of backlash, I'm a realist. He's a white man, I'm a black man. I'll probably get a backlash no matter what. Even if I did what he was doing, I would get a backlash. I'm a black man. I mean, look at some of this stuff. People are going to embrace it. Some people are going to go, wow, that's true. And there's going to be people who say, I'm offended. Why did you have to bring this up? They did that to Carol Walker. She did that big slave made of sugar cane.
Right.
You guys remember that?
Yeah.
Everybody was mad about that.
Including black people.
Yeah, black people were flipping out over it. And I'm like, she's made a statement about molasses and the slave thing and all the stuff we have to do. And it was like, people just didn't want to get it because everyone runs from Aunt Jemima. Everybody starts to run from Aunt Jemima. You remember that episode of A Different World when Whitney was doing that exhibit?
Yeah.
And she had the mammy picture and everyone freaked out. And it's like, you can't run from Mom. She's always a part of us. You can't run from that.
So when you hold up a mirror, and I think that might be a way to describe what a lot of your work is doing. A lot of our work does. Like we get backlash that other folks wouldn't get, and which is what we're seeing now in conversations around critical race theory, which is intended to change legislation and change policy.
It's bullshit hysteria.
So
like the Red Scare of the 1950s. It's bullshit hysteria.
Right.
You don't know what critical race theory is. You just know if it makes my feelings hurt, it's gotta go.
Yeah, right. And it's not poetry, it's not art, it's not music, it's really academic, it's factual information, it's delivered to you straight, no chaser. Some people say that critical race theory had its roots way back with, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and Frederick Douglass.
Well, in the curriculum for colleges, critical race theory is only 30-something years old. That's all it is. As a part of curriculum for colleges. So it's relatively new, but it has been elevated to be this really, really crazy boogeyman. And the Koch brothers are financing all these groups of white parents who are showing up at school committee meetings and cussing out and acting a fool and all that stuff. The Koch brothers are not financially backing that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, why would you? It's an ongoing quest to dumb down America, I believe, and keep us more ignorant and uninformed. It just is. It's a quest to dumb down America because the dumber we are, the more slave workers we can get. The smarter, more aware we are, the more challenges we can make, or the more changes we can make.
Is that why most of your artwork here specifically is the truth? Is it basically to spark thought?
No, I just wanted you all to give me your opinions. This is a critic.
No, I mean as far as the essence of the artwork itself, because I'm like...
The essence of the artwork itself, there are so many stories to tell. I look at it like this, and this is just speaking for myself. I don't know why they never use the word genocide when it comes to ongoing genocide as to what happens to black people. We couple all the cops who've killed, all the people, black people who've been killed by cops, male and female, for the last several hundred years once police forces were built. Those of us who were forced to stay on plantations that led to the Great Migration years and years ago because they were killing black people who were trying to get off the plantations post-slavery. You look at Reconstruction. If you go to Middle Passage and you look at the amount of black people who, most people don't realize this, sharks were constantly following the slave ships because they were throwing black people off. If you were sick, if you had hysteria,
people were jumping too.
And people were jumping and committing suicide too. So it's like, where's the number? I say it's ongoing genocide. And there's a part of me, I think it was when I went to Egypt several years ago. There's a lot of black people in Egypt. I'm going to say that straight out right now.
That's what's up.
When I was a kid, I used to love comic book superheroes. Was thinking maybe be a comic artist, illustrator, stuff like that. Then I started taking classes in college. Women's studies, African American history, African American literature, stuff like that. Gradually, Batman just turned into a white guy who's got a lot of money, who dresses up in a costume and beats the hell out of people. It started to lose its luster. And I said, well, I'm curious more and more wanting to know about Paul Robeson, Josephine Baker, all these people we love and revere who don't often get the visual representations. And ever since that time, that's what I've been doing. I'm just more compelled by the real stories of real people, who are real people, than I am over anything else. You know, I think it's frustrating that Mel Gibson got to do Braveheart, but Danny Glover has been trying for years to do one of Tucson Overture. Mm-hmm. He has been trying for like over 30 years. Why can't that story be told?
What's the answer to that?
Because they kick the white people out of Haiti.
There's no white person in the movie.
And there's no white central character who can teach Tucson how to behave himself or control Tucson's behavior, because that's what they would want to do. And, you know, that script's been around like crazy. At one point, Denzel wanted to do something more Hannibal. Hollywood was like, well, if we do a film on Hannibal, we're going to have Vin Diesel play it. And it's like, it's a musical chair, it's a bullshit game too. So I'm like, for me, I'm all about facts and truth, because there's too many lies and distortions that get fed into the mainstream, and that's the stuff that's so upsetting.
Yeah, because like one of the reasons why Harriet Tubman took so long, I remember the first script came through at like 97. They wanted to cast Julia Roberts in the role.
You joking?
No, legit.
That's why it got scary when Meryl Streep won the award for playing Margaret Thatcher. And someone said, she's so good, she could play Harriet Tubman. And black people were like, you need to shut up before someone cast her ass. Mm-hmm. Stop with that. And sometimes the casting is so piss poor when it comes to our stories. That movie about Nina Simone.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
And they hired, what's the name from Guardians of the Galaxy? And then she said, if I wasn't in the movie, you wouldn't even know who the hell she is. Who the hell are you to even say something like that?
That's true about a lot of people, though. A lot of people wouldn't know who this woman is.
If you do the work, yes you will.
Yeah, because we do know she's dark skinned and has a big nose.
And they ended up putting prosthetic and stuff on her. It's like, the purpose isn't just that you should know it. As an artist, for me, I'm like, I want people to know it, but I want to know it truthfully. If you got to bastardize it by having her have a gay friend companion who never existed and all this other shit, and then put prosthetics on her face, then fuck you. That's bullshit.
It's the same thing with the.
I'd rather watch a documentary, because there are documentaries on it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see Summer of Soul?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. Summer of Soul.
Mm-hmm.
Made me love some Stevie Wonder when he was playing the drums in the beginning. But
oh, the best. The end scene with Stevie Wonder.
I paid for your suit.
Right. Stevie, I was like, yo, Stevie's high. I was like, Stevie's high, and he's fucking with you.
The staple singers in there. I mean, that was. But just imagine the fact that nobody wanted to sell that or distribute that for over 50 years. And I'm like, man, F Woodstock, look at this.
I'm saying.
And I thought it was great that Sly and Family Stone did both concerts. I'm like, damn, Sly must have been high as hell. He was like, let's go to the next one. I'm like, that was crazy.
So we're talking about like why our stories can't be told, but we live in a...
Now, let's back it a little bit. They can be told, but are you going to bastardize it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So like they can be told, and we have examples of the Nina Simone biopic versus Summer of Soul, right? So those are two places or two different stories. One told really well, one not well at all, right?
Yeah.
So the answer is, yeah, our stories can be told, but one had a much bigger budget versus a smaller one, right? One, someone like, you know, Questlove is like taking it on as like part of his passion project and got it made, right?
Yep.
As opposed to huge studio, we love you, Zoe Saldana, we're gonna make you Nina Simone out of your mind, right? So in your work, like you're just doing it. You're like, I'm gonna tell this story. No one can stop me from telling this story. You know, in all our works, we're like, we can tell this story, but then the question is, how do we get our stories that are as truthful and as expressive as we want them to be out to the same audience at the same, you know, with the same veracity and the same scope as...
Odds are my time will come when I'm dead. Probably not gonna happen when I'm alive. I don't know. But I do know this. I've read enough of James Baldwin, and one of my favorite novels of all time is Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. He only did like one book, because the other one he did about
Black Boy.
yeah, that's not Ralph Ellison. The other book he's only done like two. Juneteenth. He did another book. The manuscript of Juneteenth. Other than that, he's just written essays. That book is a quintessential American story. You know, and it didn't get appreciated or get made into everyone should read it in colleges and all that other stuff until after he was long gone. It'd be nice to be known while I'm here and all that stuff. Yeah, everyone wants to be famous or have at least money. I don't care about fame. I don't know.
But right now, I have a camera on you, and there are people watching us, right? And we have the access now. I'm not to be obtuse or tell anyone anything that we don't know, but we have access to audience. Like kids have access to 1,000 people a day that they can get their work out to. We can, we have access to audience in ways that that Ellison didn't have.
Yeah.
That Ralph Ellison didn't have. So we have platforms. We have
YouTube and everything.
Yeah, we have spaces. We have things that we can do to get more eyeballs on the work we want, to be seen.
I'm not sure just yet. Mostly everything I've done, I just tell them to put it on, like the talks at the Spoke Gallery and stuff. Just put it on YouTube, make sure my name is in the title, so if someone goes to YouTube and looks me up, it's just there. I'd like an opportunity to exhibit for a wider spectrum audience and stuff like that, obviously. But I'm also someone who's into group shows, like when we all did 13. I just like group shows, and that's why, or like when we did the one out in Milton, that your nephew put together, and stuff like that. I just like group shows. Because it's like being in a band and y'all jamming together, and this one has the tambourine, this one has the bass, and it's all coming together nice. That's always been my thing.
I play the tambourine, that's all I can do.
Man, I was in a heavy metal band and I played. You remember that?
You ain't no goddamn heavy metal man.
You don't remember when I was in a heavy metal band I was playing in college? How good I was? I played the triangle. I'm just messing with you.
That is technically a triangle is metal. You could say I was metal as hell. I was metal. You were like Bad Brain. You were a band called Death, Bad Brains, Fishbone Metal. All right, man. So how else can we help you move this work forward? I'm not sure if you like.
If you know any groups, organizations, or people who would be compelled to say, let's have an exhibit and stuff like that. A lot of it's word of mouth or email communications in that way. And this is what I'm doing because this is just some of all the stuff I have at home. That I'm like, I want to be able to tell the black story, the black American story from 1619 when we were first brought here as slaves, our people were brought here in chains, all the way to now, in some way, shape, or form, so that if it fills this entire room or fills up several rooms, it's like, this is the story. Critical race theory, this is the shit that everyone wants to hide and stuff like that.
So more spaces, more access to galleries, platforms that would be helpful for you to tell your story and install more work.
It's our story,
right?
not mine.
Yeah, our story.
It's our story.
Well,
I feel, like I said, I feel an emotional obligation to too many of us that have died to somehow try to represent it. Because there's just too many of us that have died. So, or been injured, killed, wounded, all the different ways it's happened to us.
Oh, well, that's something for us to work on and to keep pushing towards. I think that I know that there are opportunities in other spaces, and your work is your name is ringing out, and your work is out there in spaces, and opportunities are popping up for you, and I know more will. Do you travel at all? Do you see like exhibiting in other cities, other countries?
I had an exhibit in Connecticut a couple of years ago. Frankie came to it. Him and his wife came to it. But I had an exhibit in.
That's the great Frankie Washington.
There you go, Frankie B. What's up? And I had that. I was part of a group exhibit there, so that was really nice. Some of my relatives, a lot of my relatives live in Connecticut, and some of them came to the exhibit. So I'm willing to travel, obviously, but The one thing I haven't been able to see because of the pandemic and everything is I want to see the Museum of African American History in DC.
Oh.
I haven't had a chance to see that yet.
Yeah.
And I really want to see that.
I've been there a couple times.
Yeah, I
You always
haven't.
say stuff to mess me up. That's why you said.
That's a flex.
It's gonna take a couple days.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I want to see that and just any opportunities that come my way, yeah, sure. But as I'm doing the things that I'm doing or my sketchbooks and stuff like that, I'm not going to change what I'm learning. I just respond to what I'm learning.
Yeah.
And just try to cut, paste, glue, or draw, sketch, use markers, different media to do what I'm doing. That's not what you do.
Do you ever think about writing it up as a body of work? Like creating a title and a write-up of like, this is a full body of work that could be pitched to different galleries as a
That's what I was
complete
saying
show?
earlier as Marcel Duchamp kind of did that with his, like he made like a small like gallery thing in a box with some three-dimensional stuff and all that. I want to do that. So far, mostly what I've done is I self-publish books a lot. So the books that I self-publish, you can just look through and say, okay, I get these things, I get understand. So I've done that 2 books. I'm working on a book now that's going to be hardcover. That's basically a half-century of my life, where I started, where I've gone, some of the stuff I've dealt with, post-car accident, some of the stuff with COVID, and all these other things that I'm going to put together.
Is it like sketchbook style, the inside, or is it just straight words?
Both. It's combination. So a lot of sketchbook stuff, but also drawings, collages, and different things that I've done. Because a lot of times, some of my work, I just don't bring it out because I don't have the opportunities for it to show. So it's at home. A lot of this is sitting at home. People don't know. Now here, I'm showing it, but a lot of times people don't see it. I've had too many opportunities. I mean, the Spoke Gallery show's first solo show I've had probably in over 10 years. Most of the shows I've had have been group shows where I participated in, so I haven't actually.
So my battery is about to it's on low power mode, but I don't want to wrap up the conversation. I just want to say thank you to you in front of everybody that's here on Instagram. Shout out to Marsh Kathleen Marsh, the homie, Radio Vision Safari, Divine Love Heals, Alka Chef Creations, yeah. Mo Better Blues, my art daughter, if you're still here. All right, so I love you all. Thank you guys. I'm gonna stop this from before everything's dying on me. But this is Shea Justice.
You gotta keep saying that middle name, don't you?
Listen, your mama call you Shea Ramon. I'm gonna call you Shea Ramon. I got the number, man. I'll grab your phone. I'll call mom. Shay and I have known each other since we were 15?
Yeah.
14, 15.
Star Market, Fenway Park.
Yeah, we was bullying this little dude that looked like Eddie Munster. My name is not Eddie. We were horrible punk ass kids. Yes. He really did. He looked just like, but the more I think about it now, this young Latino man was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Please stop calling me Eddie. We were horrible. I admit it. If I see him in the world, I'll apologize, and you get a free punch. All right, y'all. I'm out of here. This thing is I'm about to die. We do this on Fridays. Come through if you can. Be good to yourself. Take your medication. Drink your water. Unclench your jaw.